Today, we remember the world's greatest athletes assembled in the United States for the very first time. On July 1st, 1904, St. Louis was home to the first ever Olympics held on American soil. It was an event lost to time, but some stories still remain. After much research and doing some reading of different stories and events that happened at the time, I am honored to have been chosen to remember this historical day. I want to take you back to that time so you can really see how special of an event this was. First, we have to understand what things were really like at the time. This was actually going on amongst the World's Fair, which was celebrating the 100 years of the Louisiana Purchase. So they chose a major city within the Louisiana Territory, and the largest city at the time was St. Louis. It had grown from 10,000 people to over 500,000 people by the time this event had taken place. And that is thanks to the St. Louis City Archives giving me that information. So what the World's Fair was kind of a chance for different territories to showcase their very best technological advances, and this was only one of 11 times this has ever happened in the World's Fair history. St. Louis was one of Barcelona, Paris, and New York, along with Philadelphia, to be these cities that were able to showcase these events. So some of the new technologies that were actually debuted during this period of time were the X-ray machine, the personal automobile, which, as we know, is a car. Production of the Model T started only a few years after this, but was only the second most attractive attraction here because the highlight of the fair was actually the airship contest. This was where all the very best aircrafts at the time came and had different events, and this is actually why St. Louis is known as the city of flight, because it was one of the first times the world got to see flight on a massive scale. So moving from kind of what was going on at the time to the actual Olympics itself, it's important to remember that these athletes weren't exactly like they were today. This was actually the very first Olympics with real silver, gold, and bronze medals. So before, either it wasn't for first, second, or third place you got these medals, and they were the first ones actually that were made of real gold, silver, and bronze. Additionally, this was the first year where there was boxing, wrestling, and a decathlon in the Olympics. One of the highlights of the Olympics was actually what happened in the marathon. So this was in all sorts of national news because it was kind of a very strange thing that happened. So in the marathon, the winner at the time, Fred Lors, got into a car, drove himself to the finish line, and actually tried to win himself the gold medal. It was discovered that he did this, so he was stripped of the title of the champion, and it was given to the second place winner, Thomas Hicks. And if you look up at the Olympic database who wins, it is Thomas Hicks. But Thomas Hicks actually had his own strange thing, is that he was actually taken immediately to the hospital after the marathon because he was consuming rat poison before the race because he thought that it was going to sharpen his nervous system. Clearly, maybe it helped him a little bit because he was able to still get second place and actually get the gold medal, but still very strange to be consuming rat poison before running 26.2 miles. Just a couple of other honorable mentions of the Olympics. The first is Archie Hahn. He was known as the Milwaukee Meteor, and he won the 60 meter, 100 meter, 200 meters, all gold. So he was the best runner at the time. And he actually set an Olympic record of 21.6 seconds at the 200 meters, and that is an Olympic record that would last for 28 years. Additionally, probably the coolest story to come out of the Olympics was the story of George Iser. He was able to win 6 gymnastic medals, including 3 golds, even though he had a wooden left leg. This is thanks to onthisday.com. He really only had one leg, yet he was still able to compete and do extremely well in those events. So kind of the impact of this Olympics is it set the stage for more Olympics to come down the road. The U.S. was then able to host 3 more Olympics, and they're actually going to host an additional 4th in 2028 when it goes back to Los Angeles. So this showed the world that the U.S. was actually a major player, that the U.S. could handle both this World's Fair and the Olympics at the same time, and it just helped to let the world see that the U.S. was up and coming. And we would see that as over the next decade, the U.S. would climb to extreme heights. So I want this Olympics not to really be overshadowed by the World's Fair, because that's kind of how it was in its time. It was a very important event, and I think that people were in awe of the small Midwestern city of St. Louis, and for those few months, St. Louis was at the center of the world in a time that will not be forgotten. Thank you.